to my little English mathematic majors. Oh, I gotta bring it up first. Silly me. So, section 3.2, again, we're going to continue talking about statements, but in here we start talking about compound statements. Okay. So, there are four different types of compound statements we're going to be dealing with. You're going to see those here in just a second. And again, just like what we did in 3.1, we're going to have sentences that you create the information in symbols, and then we're going to have symbols that you turn back into sentences. More importantly than anything is to take the sentence and turn them into symbols. That's a huge one in this section. So here are the four types of compound statements we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a conjunction, which are and statements. Anytime you have two statements that are combined together with an and, that's a conjunction. You have the disjunction, which is or. Again, if you have two statements combined with an or, that is an or statement. Those are compound or statements. Okay. You got what we call the conditional, which is an if then. So if this happens, then that happens. And then we have what is called the biconditional, and that is these are abbreviations for them that you'll see me use. I normally don't use these words. I just call it ands, ors, if then, or if and only if. That's what IFF stands for. Biconditional is an if and only if. And we'll talk about that here in a second. So under here, let's talk about their notations and things. Let's talk about some examples. This whole section is all about this information and one other piece, which we call the I always mess this word up. It is the dominance of connectives. Okay, so we're going to be talking about the dominance of connectives here in just a moment. But right now, we need to get used to these individually. Okay, because these are the building blocks for what is to come in 3.3 and 3.4, which is where we get into truth tables. Okay, talking about whether these things are true or false now. All right, so if I zoom in, okay, conjunction is an and. So it looks like this information. So it's kind of symbolically a little bit right here. It is statement P and statement Q. So give you an example. Olivia is at the top of the stairs and Natalia is at the bottom of the stairs. That is a conjunction because my first statement is Olivia is at the top of the stairs. My second statement, Q, is Natalia is at the bottom of the stairs. And there we go. We could also use those same P's and Q's that we used in 3.1 that my daughters gave me. So we could have a conjunction that says, remember the P in 3.1 was I love mama. The Q in 3.1 that my oldest daughter gave us was I like watching YouTube. So a conjunction would be I love mama and I like watching YouTube. Okay, so you just put the first statement in front, slap the word and in the middle, and then put Q at the very, very end. Okay. All right. Some other, this is the actual notation right here, the upside down V. I also call this the rooftop, or it looks like the caret key that's on your calculator. So P caret Q. Okay. That looks like, that is the and symbol. It also looks like an A with the middle part that makes it look like the A cut out. So A for and. Okay, we just don't show the middle line through it. All right. Disjunction, which is an or. Basically, like I said, just the same idea. We slap the word or between it. Notice that the rooftop turns into an actual V. It's just flipped upside down. So this is P, V, Q. That's how I generally say it. And again, using those P's and Q's we talked about, like that first example I said, Olivia is at the top of the stairs or Natalia is at the bottom of the stairs. Or using the P and Q that we had from 3.1, I love mama or I like watching YouTube. Okay? And the notation is P, V, Q. All right. Conditional. If thens. So these statements look like this. If P, comma, then Q. Now there are lots of other ways that we can write this up. All right. Lots of other ways that we can write this up. I'll give you a page to look at here in just a second. But the notation is right down below that. You've got your statement P, and then an arrow, and then Q. Okay. Now, just to add some other pieces of information to this, the P is generally what we call the antecedent. All right. The Q is what we call the consequent. I'll spell those words out later on. Right now, it's not too big of a worry. Yeah, I call it the con. So P, or in other words, the if part is usually called the antecedent. The then part is called the consequent. Okay? So sometimes you'll hear me say, if the antecedent, then the consequent. Okay? So please know that this notation doesn't always have to have P arrow Q. It could be Q arrow P. It could be P arrow R. Okay? I'm just giving you a general format of what this looks like. Okay? It's your antecedent arrow the consequent. The antecedent is always with if. The then is always with the consequent. Okay? All right. So, last but not least, biconditional. Okay? Biconditional looks like this. P, if and only if, Q. Oh, I didn't give you some examples up here. So if we're using the examples that we talked about a moment ago, if Olivia is at the top of the stairs, then Natalia is at the bottom of the stairs. Or we could have said, if I love mama, then I like watching YouTube. That's an if-then statement using what we've been talking about before. We just plug in the P, we plug in the Q. Okay, down here, P, if and only if Q. And I abbreviate if and only if IFF. Okay, notice the notation. It looks a lot like the conditional, just it has a double arrow because it's bi-conditional. Bi means two. It means it goes both ways. Okay, so if I give you the example of this, Olivia is at the top of the stairs if and only if Natalia is at the bottom of the stairs. Okay, if and only if goes between the two statements. Or, I love mama if and only if I like watching YouTube. Okay? So there's examples of, what we already know. So the big part in this is, talking through writing the symbols of this. We're going to do a lot of symbol writing, a lot of notations or annotations. Just to give you some heads up on some things, page 127 in our textbook, which you have access to, gives you a chart for all the different ways we can write ands. All the different ways we can write ands. Okay? On page 129, there's really only one way to write ors. You either say or or you don't. There's nothing really special about that. Page 129 shows you all the different ways we can write conditionals. Okay? Page 129 shows you all the different ways we can write the conditionals. And then down in the biconditional, you can find that information on page 132. All right. So there are lots of ways to write these up, and you're going to start seeing some of those coming up here in just a moment. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's start looking at how we can write these statements symbolically, because that's the first thing we're going to do, and that's one of the most important things. So again, remember when we were talking in 3.1, I underline statements, okay? I box in nots, negations. When I run into conjunctions, okay, or these different types of compound statements, I circle the words that represent the compound. So I would circle the word and. I would circle the word ors. I would circle if and thens. I would circle if and only if. So that's our new symbol we're going to use in here. Okay? So when I look at number 1, and we're going to do number 1 together, we'll do number 3 together, and then I want you to try on your own number 2, number 4, and number 6. Okay? All right, so number 1, here's how the notation works. So I'm leaving. That's my first statement. Oh, I see the word and. I circle that because it is one of my compounds. You're staying. That's a statement. Now, in the directions up here, they tell you some things about the statements. Any statement that deals with I'm leaving, we're going to call P. Any statement that says you're staying, we're going to call Q. So this I'm leaving right here, that's P. This you're staying right here, that's Q. This and that we circled, remember that looks like a rooftop. So right there, just by annotating, you already have your information. You just got to write it out cleaner. So the symbolic form of number 1 is P, rooftop, Q. That's what you're looking for. Now, these, you will have to write these out. Make sure that you are using the symbols they give you in my math lab. Okay? There is a caret key on your computer when you push, who is it? It is Shift and 6. That is not the same symbol. So do not use Shift 6. Use the My Math Lab symbols. And the same thing for the V. This really is not a capital bold V. Okay, it is a My Math Lab symbol that they use. It's very, very particular. Just like in the Venn diagrams, if you have ever had to write any of those out, you need to make sure that you are using the proper union and intersection symbols. Okay, so be careful with that because it will count you wrong if you are using the wrong symbols. All right, just a heads up. You've been warned. So right here it says you're staying. So we can even add in what we've been talking about. You're staying. Who is that about? That's Q. So we know this guy's Q. Oh, I see and. Circle it. So we know that that is a rooftop. I'm not leaving. All right, not. So we know we have a negation. Squiggle. And then who is I'm leaving? That's P. So if we just clean this up, we have Q, rooftop, squiggle, P. Let those annotations help you out. I promise you, if you annotate things, it helps so much. Okay, try it 2, 4, and 6 on your own and go. Okay, so in here, hopefully you saw that you're staying. That's Q. You got and, which is a rooftop, and I'm leaving, which is P. It's almost like number 3, except over here it's just not negated. So this answer is Q, rooftop, P. And there you go. Number 4, I'm leaving. So that's P. Up, you see and, so there's your rooftop. Kind of running out of room there. That blends in too much. Let's fix this so that way we can see it a little bit better. So we got and. Rooftop. You're not staying. All right, so there's not. That means we got a negation. And you're staying was Q. So this guy looks like P. Rooftop. Negate. Q. Okay. And then down here on the final one, I'm not leaving. So the not, that's a negation. I'm leaving. That's P. Oh, there's a but. And this is where we were talking about those pages a second ago. On page 127, you can see that the word but, This is just another word for and. Okay? So if you see the word but, it really is and. All right? So that's an and symbol, the rooftop. You're staying. So you're staying, that's Q. So this looks like negate P and Q. Okay? So that's why I threw this one at you, because of that word but. I need you to understand but and are the same thing. Okay? All right, let's go do some more. So those, if you notice, were all about ands. Look at these. Go ahead and let me circle some for you real quick. Try number 10, try number 7, and go. So notice we got some new information here. It says P is I study, Q is I pass the course. So right here, if we underline I study, that's our first statement. That's P. Oh, there's or, so I circle it. Ors look like V's. And then I pass the course, that's Q. So this statement in symbolic form is P, V, Q. Now again, like I said, it's not really a V. Make sure you use the MyMathLab symbol for that. Super important. All right. The last one, number 10. I do not study. All right, so there's a not. So that's a squiggle. I do study. So that's all about P. Oh, I see or, circle it. So we know that's V. And then I do not pass the course. So there's a not. So we know it's squiggle. And then I do pass the course. That's all about Q. And there's the symbolic notation. If I want it just a little bit closer, even though I wrote it underneath, it's plain and simple. It looks like this. Squiggle, P, V, squiggle, Q. Again, it's not a V. Make sure you use the MyMathLab symbols. All right. So we did ands, we did ors. Now if you look at this, if thens, Mr. Armstrong. Hey, you guys joined me again. You got this. Absolutely. Let's do some stuff. Let's talk about some things. Okay. So right here, I'm going to look at number 11 with you. And then I want to look at number 15 with you. And I want to talk about 17 and 18 with you. So I'm not really going to give you any to try on your own, but I do want to deal with these 4. Okay. Technically, 11 and 15 you can do real quick. Go ahead, pause the video, give 11 and 15 a shot, and see what you think. But 17 and 18 I do want to talk about. Okay. So when you're looking at this, number 11. So we got new statements. P is all about this is an alligator. Q is all about this is a reptile. So, I see an if. Whenever I have a statement that starts with if, I circle it, and then I look through the rest of it to find the word then. Because any statement that starts with if is a conditional statement. Okay? So there's the word then. Now, please understand that most of the time when it starts with if, you will usually find the word then, but they don't have to write it. So sometimes they'll just say if, and then they'll put a comma, and it's understood that after the word, the comma, even though it isn't there, is the word then. Okay? Sometimes they'll write if, no comma, and then the word then. So these are the 3 ways that, sometimes you'll see these conditional statements. Sometimes it'll be if, and then there'll be a comma. Please understand that they're just not writing the word then in there, but it is understood that it should be there. Most of the time you'll see if, and then the comma then. But sometimes they don't have to have the comma there. Okay? So these are just some of the forms. So you see if I see the word if, then that means I'm looking for throughout the rest of this the then part. Okay? So right here, this is an alligator. Well, that's P. The then part right here, this is where I actually put the arrow. The beginning if, I circle it because that's a clue for me that somewhere along here there should be a then. Okay? This is a reptile. That's Q. So if I write this out, this is P arrow Q. That's the symbolic notation for it. Now, down here on number 15, hopefully it didn't get you, but what they actually did on 15 is they wrote things backwards. Okay? Here's the if. They put it second. This part in front is the actual then. Okay? So sometimes they write this stuff backwards. You'll have your then statement, and then they'll have the word if. Okay? So it's kind of like blank if blank. This is the consequent part. This is the antecedent part. Okay? So this statement right here is what goes first. And notice it says it is not a reptile. So that's squiggle, and reptile is Q. So the beginning of our piece starts with negate Q. Even though it's written second, you always put the antecedent first when you write it. This if actually gets the arrow. Okay? Because the then part is actually right here at the beginning. They flip-flop spots. This is not an alligator. So that's squiggle, and an alligator is P. So this is what that statement really looks like. Negate Q, arrow, negate P. They just wrote it backwards. Okay? So be careful of that. Sometimes you will not see the word then because they drop it like it's hot. Okay? Sometimes they will write it backwards. Anybody that is attached with the word if is what we call the antecedent. Okay? Anybody that goes with the then is the consequent. Keep that in mind. And then right down here, 17 and 18. Be careful of these because this right here is necessary for, is sufficient for. That means that these are conditionals. This is another way to write if then. Notice there's no if or then in here. But if I see is necessary for, is sufficient for, I know that these are arrows. Now, you have to be careful with what's being given here because one of these is written correctly with the antecedent first and then the consequent. The other one is like 15 where it is written backwards. Okay? So, the one that is written with sufficient in the middle, this is the one that is written correctly. So, blank, sufficient, blank. This is the one that is P arrow Q. This is the antecedent. I don't know why I put an N in front of there. Antecedent. This is the antecedent. This is the consequent. Okay? Actually, I'm not going to say P arrow Q over here. I'm going to say antecedent arrow consequent because that's better. That's a better description because it's not always P arrow Q. Okay? The one that has necessary in the middle, that's the one that is written backwards. Okay? So the consequent is first. The antecedent is second. But you still have to write it antecedent, arrow, consequent. It's just written backwards. Okay? A lot like 15. We had to put the antecedent first, then the consequent. Conditionals are very specific like that. Conditionals are the ones that you have to watch out for. You have to watch their order. It's super important that you know who the antecedent is and who the consequent is. Okay? So, with dealing with 17 and 18, go ahead and write the symbols for these now that I've given you a little bit of information about them. Go ahead, try it, and go. Okay. So, we know that 17 is the one written backwards. So that means we know being a reptile, this guy is the consequent. Okay? So this is the letter that should be going second. And being a reptile, that is Q. Being an alligator, this is the antecedent, so it's going to go first, and that's P. So this guy looks like P arrow Q, because the antecedent notation comes first, then the consequent. All right, last but not least, we know sufficient is written in the correct order. Okay. So being an alligator, that's P. Okay. This guy is the antecedent. It's in the correct order. Being a reptile, that's Q. This guy is the consequent. So the end symbolic notation for this is P arrow Q. Okay. Watch out the order, and it's specifically on the conditionals. Conditionals, they're the ones that give us the biggest hang up in chapter 3. Okay, just watch the order, watch the way they're written. Most of the time, I'm going to try and keep it plain and straight for you, where I say if blank, then blank. Okay, I like keeping it in this form. Okay, but occasionally they slip in the ones where they're backwards, or they'd use that necessary and sufficient junk. Drives me nuts. Okay? All right. So we've done ands, we've done ors, we've done conditionals. Last but not least, if and only ifs. So go ahead and look at number 27 and 29. Try those on your own. And then I want to talk about number 31, which is just like number 32. And go ahead, try 27, 29, and then we'll talk 31. Go. Okay. So, again, we got a new P. The campus is closed. We got a new Q. It is Sunday. So, we underline the first statement. The campus is closed. So, that is P. Oh, I see if and only if. So, I'm going to circle that giant thing. That means this is a biconditional. That means I have the double arrow. And then I underline the next statement. It is Sunday. So that is Q. So the symbolic notation to this is P double arrow Q. Oh, I didn't mention this. In this, guys, so you know, the arrow always points to the right. Do not flip that arrow around. It always points to the right. It doesn't point up. It doesn't point down. It doesn't point to the left. It doesn't point diagonally. It always points straight to the right. And again, it's always the antecedent and the consequent. Now, these are called biconditionals, just so you know. They don't have antecedents and consequence. It's just statements. So there's nothing really special about the biconditional other than it's a double arrow. And what that double arrow means is that it likes to go both directions. P arrow Q and Q arrow P. That's why it's a double arrow, because it's two conditionals in one. Okay? So hopefully down here you underlined it is not Sunday. So that's a squiggle. And Sunday is all about Q. Oh, if and only if. Hopefully you circled that. That's a double arrow. The campus is not closed. So that's a squiggle P. Sorry, I wrote a Q because the campus being closed is all about P. So this guy looks like squiggle Q double arrow P. All right. So the other way that you're going to see a biconditional written, just like what you saw with conditionals, how they have the words necessary and the word sufficient. Well, in biconditionals, they put those both in one. So when you see the words is necessary and sufficient for, that's just another way of saying if and only if. Okay? Just another way of saying if and only if. So this is just a large double arrow right there. And again, you just keep the order. Being Sunday, well, that is Q. The campus being closed, that's all about P. So when we write this, that's Q double arrow P. Now, if you look at number 32, just kind of talking about it, I actually should have did all that in purple. Let's highlight that stuff. Okay, let's change it to purple because I like to be consistent. I think that's my purple. No, that's really, really dark. Maybe that's my purple. Yeah, whatever. We'll go with the darker. Nah, we'll go with the lighter one. Okay. So grabbing, coming back up here so I can write again. Grabbing my purple. So let's take a look at number 30. Yeah, I chose a weird looking purple. That's fine. It's all still purple. So is necessary and sufficient for. Again, you see that? That's my double arrow. Now over here it says the campus is closed. We know that that's P. Being Sunday, we know that that's Q. So this guy looks like P double arrow Q. What's interesting enough about biconditionals is both of these statements are really the same notation, and you could either have it written as P double arrow Q or Q double arrow P. Both of these have the same answer. Okay, even though I know these look different, okay, I know these look different, but they really are the same answer, okay? So most of you will be like, well, Mr. Armstrong, how do I know which one to put in my math lab? Well, generally, when I put this into my math lab, I go with the way that the statements are given to me. Since this one started with Q, then it was the double arrow, then it was the P, I go Q double arrow P. This one started with the P, double arrow, then the Q, and that's the way I would write it. Okay. I wouldn't take this and say that the answer is P double arrow Q because I just like to write it the way I'm given. Okay. So when it comes to biconditionals, you could actually flip flop these two pieces around and it's still true. It is still a true symbolic nature for what you're giving us. But for the most part, when it comes to biconditionals, I write it the way I see it from left to right. Okay. So these are the different ways that you see biconditionals being thrown at you. All right. So let's see what I have next. I believe. Okay, so now we're reversing it. So I've given you the information on how we could take sentences and turn them into symbols. Now we've got symbols and I wanted to turn them back into sentences. So again, I'm not going to look at all of these. I just want to look at a few with you guys. So we'll look at this guy. We'll jump over here to that one. We'll look at number 38 and we'll look at number 40. Okay. So again, in class, I would have you guys be talking to me out loud here and just telling me the statements. But go ahead and write down what you believe these statements are for practice, and then I'll show you what I would have written, and we'll see how well they compare. Now, remember, there are lots of ways to write these. So just because your statement isn't word for word mine doesn't mean that you're wrong. All right? So go ahead, pause the video, give them a shot. All right, so we got new P's and Q's here. P is the heater is working, the house is cold. So this says negate P. So we're going to say the heater is not working. That's the negation. I see a rooftop, so we know that's the word and. And then I see Q, a house is cold. Boom, that's it. That's the sentence. The heater is not working and the house is cold. You don't really have to add all too much to make these. Sometimes you have to add in a couple words to make sure, again, the sentences must read correctly, no caveman speak and things like that. You don't, I mean, if you wanted to, you could have used the comma but again, I'm all about keeping it simple. Just go for the straightforward answer. For these, when we're talking conditionals and biconditionals, you will not see me use the words is necessary for, is sufficient for, or is necessary and sufficient. I won't use those. Why try and be fancy? Don't try and be fancy. That's when there are mistakes made. Okay? Just be straightforward about your answers. Get it done. Because that's what my math lab is going to do, and that's what I do. I go for the straightforward answer. All right, so number 35, We got this P, so that means the heater is working. I see a V, so that's the word or. And then we got negate Q. Oops, no capital. The house is not cold. Boom, there you go. That's all you got to be able to do. See, nothing crazy, okay? The part that drives us crazy is taking the sentences and turning them into symbols. That's the part that takes the longest. This is actually the straightforward, let's just make some sentences. And here, now, my first symbol is a Q, but I also see that arrow there. That means that this is an if and only if. So I need to start with the word if, okay, because of the arrow. And now I put in my Q. Okay. Remember, this arrow represents the word then for us. That's really kind of how I think about it. Okay. So our Q is the house is cold. So if the house is cold, then that's my arrow right there. Then I'm going to negate P. The heater is not working. Not naughty. Naughty working. Silly Mr. Armstrong. Okay. And so the last one, number 40, you see the double arrow, so we know that's if and only if in there. The only one that you really just have to watch out for symbols, again, like I said, is the conditionals. When it comes to a conditional, you need that word if in the beginning. Okay. Although there are lots of ways to write it, I'm going for the keep it simple answer. Okay. So by conditionals, we know that this double arrow means if and only if. That will be in the middle. So all we do is just write our statements around that. So negate P. So that means the heater is not working. If and only if, that's the double arrow. No commas around it. Okay, never has commas. If and only if, Q, the house is cold. There we go. That's what it's like. And again, for these, you're not actually going to have to write these out. Again, you're looking through a list of multiple choice answers. Find me the one that represents the statement. Okay? See, nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. We got this. All right. So on this one, go ahead and I want you to try 41, try 44, try 46, and 47. Try those four and go. So notice they didn't use P and Q in this one, they use Q and R. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that, but generally when we deal with things like this, we do start with P's and Q's. Okay, so keep that in mind. Let's see here. Okay, so let's get started writing. 41. So I see a rooftop, so we know that's an and. So it's going to be, it is July 4th, or you could have said it is the 4th of July. Again, like I said, there's lots of ways to write this, right? And negate R. We are not having a barbecue. Boo! Barbecue is like essential on the 4th of July. It's delicious. All right, 44. We got this Q, then it's a V, negate R. So that V represents or. This is an or compound, so we'll write Q. It is July 4th, or it is the 4th of July, or we are not having a barbecue. Okay. So there's number 44. 46. I see that arrow, so that means I got to start with an if, and then we're going to do Q, then negate R. So if it is July 4th, then we are not having a barbecue. Easy peasy. Last one. Hopefully you recognize this as the by conditional. So it is not July 4th. Oops, no comma. If and only if we are having, not having, that's weird. I don't even know what that is. Having a barbecue. And there it is. Just like what we were talking about before. Nothing crazy. You're just taking what they give you and putting it into a sentence. And again, like I said, in your assignment, you're going to be looking through multiple choice. All right, last one of this, and then we're going to take and we're going to put this all together. We're going to have compounds of compound statements. We're going to talk about that dominance of connectives as well. Okay, so what I want to talk about in this is 49, and I want you to try 53. Okay, so let me talk to you about what this negation parenthesis means. Okay, whenever you see the negation followed by parenthesis information, this means that your statement is starting with is it, or sorry, it is not true that. That's what that means. This negation parenthesis is that giant not statement you saw in 3.1. Okay? So when you see that negation parenthesis, the first thing you're going to write is, it is not true that. Okay? Now there is another way to write this. You'll see it soon enough, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But right now, I want you to just know that whenever you have negation parenthesis, you're starting with, it is not true that. So if I looked at number 49, the statement will read as such. It is not true that, and then now I put in the stuff inside. Okay? So I've got P, carrot top or rooftop, which is and Q. So P is Romeo loves Juliet, and Juliet loves Romeo. There you go. All that little squiggle parenthesis means it is not true that. All right. Give 53 a shot. Go. Okay. So hopefully you wrote, it is not true that. And then we got PVQ. Or sorry, QVP. Okay. So the V means or. So the Q is Juliet loves Romeo, or Romeo loves Juliet. And there you go. Okay. All right, everyone. It's time to put it all together. But before we can put it all together, this is the last piece. Before we can put it all together, we have to talk about dominance of connectives. Okay. So what dominance of connectives, it's kind of like what we were talking about right over here. It's all about parentheses. Okay. Because when we have longer statements, because we are complex humans, we don't just talk in one statement or a simple two compound statement at a time. You know, we have sentences like, if there's a rainstorm outside and my house has a leaky roof, then it's going to leak into my house and ruin my work. There's a lot of information going on there. I had two ands, I had an if then, and there should be some parentheses happening if I was to write this thing symbolically. And that's what the dominance of connectives helps us establish, is where do we put parentheses? Okay. So there is a flow to this, and here's the flow. So this is talking about how our how dominant are our symbols. So the weakest symbol we have is the negation symbol. Ands and ors are a little bit stronger than that. Conditional is stronger than ands and ors. And the strongest symbol we have is the biconditional. Okay. So when we look through statements, where when we talk about the dominance of connectives, we always want to find out who is the strongest. So it's just like if you go to prison, you want to find the biggest, baddest person in there, and that's who you want to befriend. Or if you want to be the biggest, baddest person, I guess you take them on, and good luck to you. So don't die. No, but when we deal with the symbolic notation, you want to try and find the strongest symbol because that's going to tell you that there should be parentheses either before it or after it or on both sides of it. And that's what I'm saying right here. To apply dominance of connectives, if grouping symbols are not given, okay? So if they don't show you the grouping symbols or commas do not appear in the compound statement. So another thing that you're going to find out, or what you just found out now, is that if you have commas, that means you have a grouping symbol, either before or after that comma. Commas are a signal that's saying, hey, there are parentheses in this. Okay? But we will apply this information if they do not give us symbols from the beginning. In other words, if they don't give us the parentheses from the beginning when we're in symbols, or they do not give us commas in our written out statement, we will apply this information. Okay? So you're going to see how that works here in a second. All right? So let's do this. I got 2 more pages and then we're done with 3.2. There's a lot of information in this, I know. So, question on this is, are we missing parentheses? Should we be applying this dominance of connectives? Okay. So let's take a look at 69. Let's look at, 67, 69, 71, 76, 77, and 80. Okay? So let's take a look at these. Some of these I'm going to do with you, some of them I will not. All right, so number 67. Do I have parentheses? Absolutely. And I don't have to worry about dominance of connectives here. Okay? If you have parentheses, then that means they've pretty much taken care of the dominance of connectives. You don't have to worry about anything. Okay? If you look at number 71, notice there are no parentheses. This is what I was talking about right here. If grouping symbols are not given. Okay? So, 67, there are grouping symbols. 71, there are not. Okay? So in 71, we need to apply this information. And what you need to look for is the strongest symbol in there. So when you look through 71 here, who is the strongest symbol? And what we're going to do, how I notate the strongest symbol, I put a star by it. That is the strongest symbol. Okay? Because out of the 3 symbols we have negation, we have an or, and a conditional. If you go back here, conditionals are the strongest. Okay? So, since I know this is the strongest, that means I either have parentheses before it, after it, or both. Okay? Now let me tell you how you're going to know what. We do not put parentheses around a single statement. Okay? Single statements are the single letters like P, or negated statements like negation P. Those are considered single statements. We do not put parentheses around those. So if we look up here at what's going on in front of the star, you have a single statement right here. Do not put parentheses around that. Ever. Okay? Although technically it's not wrong, just so you know, it's not wrong if you do that. But according to my math lab, we don't want it. Okay? But technically it's not wrong. But don't do it. All right. So if we look after the star, though, look right here. We have negate P or negate Q. Because this is a compound, in other words, I have more than one statement back here. I have compound statements. I have two, P and Q, or actually P or Q, actually, to be more specific. This is the side that gets the parentheses. Okay? Not the front, but the back. So if you have compound statements, those are the ones that we want parentheses around. Sometimes you have compounds both in front and back. That's why I'm saying sometimes you put parentheses in both places. But again, the places that get parentheses, it's either before the strongest symbol, after the strongest symbol, or in both spots. Okay? Again, no parentheses around single statements. So go ahead and look at 69, 77, 76, and 80 and see what you think. See if you have to put in missing parentheses. And go. Okay. So hopefully when you looked at number 69, you said, hey, this thing's A-okay, because it already has the parentheses taken care of. Okay. It's already grouped for us. So you do not have to worry about anything there. If you come down here to 76, notice there are no parentheses. Hopefully you realize this is the strongest. And hopefully you put parentheses around the last piece, because this is where we have compounds. R is just a single statement, no parentheses. Okay? So that's where the parentheses would go in number 76. And number 77 and number 80, hopefully you did not worry about parentheses on those because they are already taken care of. Okay? So I wanted to give you kind of a heads up on that. You know, that's how parentheses work. Find your strongest symbol and you either put parentheses with the compound statements in front of it. And again, it has to be compound, not single. Or you put parentheses after the strongest symbol. Again, must be compound. Or you can put them in both, as long as they're both compound. Okay? So let's get to where we are writing symbolic notation. Oh, I was wrong. I actually have two more pages after this. So right here, they're telling us P, Q, and R. And I want you to write these in symbolic notation. So let me give you some to work on. Go ahead and try 59. Try 61. Try 63. And let's see what you do on number 66. And go. Okay. So, number 59. We underline statements. So this is where annotating is hugely going to help you out. The temperature outside is freezing. Well, we know that that is P. Oh, I see an and. That is a rooftop. The heater is working. Hey, that is Q. Now, notice right here, you see an or, but right in front of that or, you see this comma. That means that this or is our strongest symbol. Okay? This is telling you who is the best. That's what I was saying right back here. Or commas do not appear in the compound statement. We have a comma, so we don't have to worry about dominance of connectives because this comma that we have right here is telling you or is the strongest. Okay? So we know that this symbol right there is our strongest guy. Sorry, not a rooftop, a V. That's our strongest. Super important. And it's because of that comma right there as the reason. And then over here, the house is cold. That's R. So if we wrote this out symbol-wise, we've got P, rooftop, Q, V, R. Now remember, we know that this is the strongest. Okay? So that means there are either parentheses before or after this symbol. Where are the parentheses going to be at? Hopefully you said before. And there's what it looks like. So if they give you commas, they are telling you who is the strongest symbol. If they do not give you commas, then you go through what we just did over here once you got all the symbols, like what we did on number 71 and 76. Once you had the symbols written out, that's when you look for the strongest, if there is no comma in the statement. Okay? Yeah, just kind of looking through some things. All right, so right here. Oh, I see the word if. That means there should be a then somewhere. Okay? So I circle that. Oh, there's the word then. And look, it's got a comma right before it. That means this guy's the strongest. Which makes sense because then is a pretty strong symbol. Okay? So we know the arrow is the strongest for us. All right, so now the temperature outside is freezing. That's P. Or, okay, so that's a V. The heater is not working. So there's a not. So that's negate Q because the heater is working as Q, not as a negation. We know what the then is. The house is cold. That's R. So P, V, negate Q, arrow, R. So if I didn't know about the comma, then this is what I would write, and I would do like what we did earlier. Who in here is the strongest symbol? Okay, and that would be the conditional. But since we had the comma in there, we already know this guy is the strongest. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mark that in purple, kind of like what we did earlier. I'm going to make things match because I like matching. So we know that this guy is the strongest because of the comma. So that means over here, where the parentheses is going to go, before, after, or both, it's going to go before because here's where we got the compound information happening. Okay? See, easy peasy. You guys got this. All right. So the next one says the house is cold. That's R. Oh, I see a comma and I see if and only if. So we are telling you right here that this, and I should do this in purple, is the strongest symbol. Okay? If and only if is our strongest symbol because there is a comma in front of it. Comma signify the strength as being the top honcho. Okay, and that makes sense because biconditionals are the strongest overall. And then right here, we continue on. The temperature outside is freezing. That's P. Circle the and that's our rooftop. And the heater isn't working. So I box in the not, and so that's squiggle Q. So if I write this out, we've got R, double arrow, P, and squiggle Q. Again, we know strongest symbol right there. So that means I either have parentheses before or after. So looking at this, the parentheses should go after because that's where the compound statements are. All right, last but not least, number 66. A freezing outside temperature, so that is P, is both necessary and sufficient for, so remember that guy is our Q right here. That's that special word. And it's our biconditional. For a cold house, that is our R. And then look right here. It says if the heater is not working. Okay? So technically this should have been in at the very beginning. Okay? But we also have a not here. So negate heater is working is Q. I'm going to have to expand this. And let's zoom in on this so it's a little bit tighter. There we go. Scrolling down. So what we have, this if, this is actually the beginning piece, so you know. Okay? This is the then. All right? So we've got P, double arrow, because this is the if then part, it is negate Q, arrow, R. Okay? Because this is the antecedent. This part here is the consequent. Okay? So notice they didn't give us any commas. So this is where you go with that level dominance of connectives. There were no commas up here. This is what we did right back here in 71 and 76. So if you look between these symbols, who is the strongest? The biconditional. Where do the parentheses go? Right after the biconditional around these two compound statements. Okay? There we go. Last ones. So now I take the training wheels off. I'm not telling you who P, Q, and R are. Okay? So let's talk about how we deal with these kind of sentences when we do not know who the P, the Q, and the R are. Okay? They're not specifically telling us. So here's how this is going to work. We're going to look at 81 together, and then I'll give you some down here to go through and try on your own, okay? All right, I see the word if. That means there's a then somewhere. Up, there it is. There's my arrow, okay? Now, we've got this statement. I like the teacher. Since this is the first statement, and they don't tell us who is who, we call this P. We just go in order of the variables as we move on down. Remember, we always start with our first statement, who is P. Okay? Oh, I see the word or, so that is a V. The course is interesting. That is an entirely new statement. So we're going to call that Q. We've got the then, which is our arrow. I do not miss class. That, again, is another statement, and it is entirely new with the word not. So since this is another new statement, this will be squiggle R. So if we write this out, it's P, V, Q, arrow, squiggle, R. Notice there were no commas. So this is where you got to apply that dominance of connectives. Who's the strongest symbol? The arrow. So who are we going to put parentheses around? The beginning or the end? It's going around the beginning. Okay? That's what these are like. So if they don't tell you what statement is what, you name the statements starting with P, and every time you get a new statement, you change it back to the next letter in following it. Okay, so let me give you some problems here to try. We're not doing every single one of these. Oh, I don't want dual page. I want entire page. Oops, sorry, single page. Let's go entire page. There we go. So I want you to try 84. Try that one. Try. Oh, try 87 and try 90. Try those three on your own. Go ahead, pause the video, give it a shot. This is as tough as what it gets. If you can do this, you can do anything. And again, if you want to talk about any of these other examples anytime, email me, call me, text me. Let's have a Zoom meeting about it, okay? So, because it is very important that you can turn these sentences into symbols. And go. Okay. So, I'm going to zoom back in on this so that way we can come down and do some things. All right. So, number 84. The lines go down. And each one of these, the previous problem does not affect the following problem. So, up here, even though I said I like the teacher is P, if I see that down below here, it doesn't necessarily have to remain P depending on when it falls. Okay? So just because you named it P here doesn't mean down here it has to still be P. Okay? So the lines go down. So that is Q. I see a comma and the word or. So we know that this is our strongest symbol, the V. Okay? I see an if. That means there should be a then. There's that then. So we know that's the conditional. The transformer blows. That's an entirely new statement. So let's call that, actually, I don't know why I called this Q. I think I called it P, but I wrote a Q. But it should be P. This guy over here is Q because it's an entirely new statement. And then we do not have power. So there's a not. And this is an entirely new statement. So this is squiggle R. So what we have is P, V, Q, arrow, squiggle, R. And they told us this is the strongest. So where do my parentheses go? Right after it. Around those two items. The Q, arrow, negate, R. Okay? There's 84. All right. Number 87. Oh, I see an if. That means there should be a then somewhere. But if you read through this, you do not see the word then. This is what I was talking about. Sometimes they ghost you on the word then. I'll tell you that word then is actually right here. Because these are two statements. I like the teacher, which we'll call P. I do not miss class. Squiggle Q. Okay? So that word then is actually right here. They didn't write it in because this is one way that we can write it. So this is where the arrow goes. Okay? If and only if, you know that that's our double arrow. And then it says, the course is interesting. That's an entirely new statement. We'll call that R. So if we wrote this out, it's P, arrow, negate, Q, double arrow, R. There were no commas. So who's the strongest in here? The biconditional, according to the dominance of connectives. Where do my parentheses go? Around the beginning. And there it is. Done. Last one. So, I see an if. That means there should be a then. And there it is. That's my arrow. The lines do not go down. So there's a not. So we'll call this squiggle P. Oh, I see an and. So that's a rooftop. We have power. So that's a new statement. So we'll call that Q. Okay. The transformer does not blow. So that's a negate R because that's an entirely new statement. Oh, I see the word or, so that's a V. There is an increase in the cost of electricity. That's another new statement. So we're going to call that S. So what we have is negate P and Q, arrow, negate R, V for the or, and S. So again, there was no comma in here, but who's the strongest? The conditional. So are we going to put parentheses before, after, or both? Hopefully you made it both before and after because we have compounds here and compounds there. And that's it. That's 3.2. It's all about working with these compound statements, taking and turning them into symbols. That's the important piece. Or taking the symbols and telling me what the real sentence was. So, have fun. Good luck. You got this. See you soon.